Ladies and gentlemen, today it's my pleasure to welcome to the channel Si Wolstencroft, not only the drummer for The Fall from 1986 to 1997, but also a man who grew up with Ian Brown and John Squire and drummed in one of the earliest incarnations of the Stone Roses and the Smiths. Simon, hello, and welcome to the channel.
Hi, James. Hi, everybody.
Tell us the story of how you, Ian Brown, John Squire all met.
Aged 11 at Old Grammar, when I noticed this Ian Brown in the class stood out. Reminded me of Bruce Lee, had the cheekbones, the haircut, and was doing all the moves, in the corridor at Old Grammar there. The three of us were in the class, me and John and Ian. And I just sort of gravitated towards Ian, really. He had the class in stitches. He'd come in the classroom doing imitations of all the teachers. John was the quieter one. But the three of us started a proto-punk group. It didn't sound a million miles away from the Clash, called The Patrol. And it was a great time. It was a great education. That's how the three of us started.
Brilliant. So you were actually in Ian Brown and John Squire's first band then?
They were in my band, James. Yeah.
When you were in that three-piece band with him, I know Ian was on bass, wasn't he?
Yeah, we did. We had a singer, Andy Cousins, who we met at South Trafford College. We needed a singer, so we started looking around, in the canteen at dinner time. Ian it was who spotted Andy Cousins kicking somebody's head in the canteen. We played a few bars in town, the local Dunham Massey Village Hall in Cheshire. And it was a great time. It was a great education.
Did you get to meet like Manny and Rennie and the other guys?
Oh, God, yeah. I saw Manny the other day. John, I don't really see anymore. Rennie, last time I saw him was when I played at Wembley Stadium with my band, the G.O.D. We supported the Stone Roses. While I was there, I did see Rennie, who I think's the best drummer in Manchester, by the way. Their entourage was going on stage and they stopped their entourage to come and say hello to me, especially. We'd had a bit of argy-bargy several years before. There was a review when The Second Coming came out in Select magazine. And I'd said, they were interviewing The Fall about it, and I said, there's only two tracks on it, Love Spreads and Begging You I quite liked. I didn't think it was any good, really. When I joined up with Ian Brown later on in the year 1999, Ian took me round to Rennie's house. And he says, what, you brought that bum here with you for? Because of this interview.
That's really interesting because you never hear much about Rennie. You always hear stuff about Manny, who's like seems to be Mr. Sociable, and Ian Brown, he's always out there, isn't he?
Yes,
John and Rennie are the kind of the reclusive ones.
Yes.
That's interesting. So what happened after Rennie said that? Did Ian just kind of take you off again, or?
Well, he basically said, what you brought that bum with you for? And I said, right, I'll see you, I'm going, because it was at Rennie's house.
Your take on Second Coming was not that far removed from what a lot of people felt.
No, I think even Ian admitted it to me once, There's only a couple of tracks on it. He actually said that to me.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you first connected with Johnny Marr and the various musicians that were Freak Party? How did you guys meet in the first place?
When I was 16, I started drinking in a pub called The Vine with Ian and John. And there was a lad I knew, Dave Collum, who was a mate of mine. And he said to me, Simon's this guy called Johnny Marr, who lives in Wythenshawe, and he's a hotshot guitarist. He's looking for a drummer. He came in, a few days later, strutting in. He looked like Keith Richards or something, the earrings, leather coat, all his hair like a bouffant. We ended up going round to Andy Rourke's dad's house, which was just down the road, and just chatting and playing music. And we decided we were going to start this band and we're going to be called Freak Party. He wasn't really into punk, I don't think, really, Johnny. He was into more sophisticated stuff. Classical Gas, it's called. It's an instrumental piece on a guitar. And he got this acoustic out on his little house there on his bed in his box room. Couldn't believe it, and he's chatting away, playing this really complicated song called Classical Gas. And while he was turning the pages of the Enemy all at the same time, I thought, blimey, he's good, this kid,
What was Johnny Marr like as a young lad?
Well, we were smoking a lot of draw back then, and we had a bong round at the house. So he's just a dead cool guy. Really funny. He'd always have a guitar playing along. Andy Rourke could be playing along on his bass. It might be Parliament, or it could be Wings, but Andy was playing on a big stereo there. We started going to a rehearsal room. We started off in a carpet shop in the basement in Sale. And then we sort of graduated to this Decibel studio in Ancoats. We actually got a visit off the Serious Crime Squad one night. And all three of us got arrested. It's all on the record. Johnny had got involved in a stolen Lowry print at some point, and it took us to Longsight Police Station into unmarked Granada's, and let me and Andy out first thing in the morning, but they kept Johnny, and he was prosecuted. And we rehearsed for about 18 months, tried to get a singer, tried 2 or 3, but just weren't suitable. Anyway, me and Andy Rourke and Johnny went our separate ways for 2 or 3 months. And then Johnny rang me one night and said, Si, I found a singer. He said, we call the Smiths. And I said, oh, it's not a very good name, that, is it? Give it a try outside, please. Will you? Come down and play on our demo. We're going to get a record deal. We're going to be big and all this. So I did. Went down to Ancoats on Jersey Street. And there was a studio there called Decibel that this French guy owned, Philippe. He was away in business in Paris. And so the engineer, Dale Griffin, who actually played bass on this session with me, Morrissey and Johnny, he got the key and let us in, and did it for nothing. Now that I thought about it all these years later, if Andy Rourke had been playing bass on that night there, it might have all been different. It's got to have funk for me. So it wasn't funky. We're singing about the Moors murders. And Morrissey wouldn't look at me in the eye. And I thought, that's odd, really, for a grown man. I was about 18 or 19, same as Johnny. According to Johnny Marr's book, they begged me to be the drummer, both of them, and were giving me bribes, little bags of weed and stuff. But my heart just wasn't in it. And a great question somebody once asked me, who would you rather been in, the Stone Roses or the Smiths? And I've thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and it would be the Smiths. And I did see Morrissey a couple of years ago in Alton. I was buying stamps, and he was on his own. He looked very upset, actually, and he was, because his mother had passed away that few days later. But I said, "Hiya, how are you?" And he was really frightened. He thought I was going to thump him outside WH Smith. Then a couple of seconds later, he realised who I was, and he started asking about Mark E. Smith straight away. And he went, "Oh, how was Mark's funeral? I heard it kicked off," he said. I said, "Yeah, there's a bit of beer glasses being thrown around." So that was the last time I saw him.
Johnny Marr said that when you actually jammed with the Smiths the first time, you had this kind of slight lack of things meshing perfectly with Morrissey. And Johnny Marr mentioned that you didn't quite click with Morrissey's voice, his kind of operatic style of singing.
Yes, it was just kind of a bit of a shock when he came in and started singing. I thought, God, I just don't like this at all. Over the Moors, oh, take me to the Moors. I knew it was about the Moors murders. I thought, my God, what's going on? It's just not for me, this.
That's fair enough. So do you reckon it was kind of never meant to be, or do you kind of look back on it with a certain amount of bittersweet feeling?
I've got no regret. It took me a while. Once they'd gone huge on Top of the Pops every week, I was really down, and I was self-medicating. I've had a full life anyway, so I don't really regret it. The fact that I wasn't in the Smiths,
So you were involved in the Stone Roses in the very earliest days, but ended up not being a permanent member. The same with the Smiths, but then your big break came, joining The Fall in 1986. Can you tell us about how you joined that band?
Johnny Marr's hairdresser, Andrew Berry from Wythenshawe, he was wanting to start a trio, a garage rock band, psychedelic. Johnny introduced me to Andrew. We started a band called The Weeds after a little hobby we all had. And we went on tour with The Fall. But I was aware of them, but I really got to know how good they were when I heard This Nation's Saving Grace. It was the album just before I joined, and that is the best one in my opinion. Well, one day we're on tour with the Fall in London. There was always arguments between Marquis Smith and Carl Burns, my predecessor, all the time. Mark came out one day in a half light, rapped on the window. Can I have a word with you, cock? Yeah, what is it? Wound the window down. Do you mind if I just jump in? Yeah, come round. And he gets in the passenger seat. Listen, how do you fancy joining the Fall, cock? And I said, I won't mind. Yeah. Didn't even think about the weeds, because I knew people were getting money for doing this. All right, then, but as long as I can have a contract for 6 months. And he wrote the contract on the back of an embassy filter packet in the van. But so that was the start of 11 years touring all over the world.
That's
and
brilliant.
Recording, in brilliant studios. Because I played on all the so-called hits.
Yeah.
Starting off with Mr. Pharmacist
and
Victoria, and There's a Ghost in My House, and Lost in Music.
The Fall were unbelievably prolific. I mean, the Fall discography is quite hard to believe. How did you guys produce so much material?
Well, I think it was quantity more than quality quite often. We didn't get enough time to do 3 or 4 or 5 takes of a song. It was the first take. We go in the studio. We've been waiting for Marr all afternoon, and he'd come back, from the pub, drunk, and start going, right, come on, 1, 2, 3, 4. Off we went. And so anything that we'd previously rehearsed, he just totally disregarded it, and that's how it was. And after I'd met him in the transit van there in London, when he asked me to join, he said, come round and see me at my house. He had a great big fish tank in the room, and that's where he used to keep his money, behind the fish tank, wads of money. Although he gave us a salary every month for 10 of those 11 years. And then there was, he'd not been paying the VAT bill. And basically, I got out just in time because Steve Hanley, my one-time roommate on bass, he got hit up with a massive bill, which God bless them, the Musicians Union paid half of it for him. But for the first few years, he was great. Sort of wavered around 1992, 93, when we came to do the Middle Class Revolt album in 94, 95. I'd been on holiday with my dad to Tunisia. Got back, nobody had a mobile, really, in 94. And found out where they were, and they were in a residential studio. Carl Burns was on my drum kit. I got him a Golf GTI and shot down the M56 and screeched up on a gravel outside. I could hear somebody playing drums in his car. And I walked in these French windows, and he got up, scared, really, because he thought I was going to clobber him. He gingerly put these sticks back down on the floor, Tom, my floor, Tom. I said, it was Mark, he made me do it.
Was that the point at which your relationship with Marky Smith began to break down a bit?
Yes, it was, really. Yeah, I kind of lost respect. It was almost like he was punishing me for going on holiday to Tunisia with my dad. And it was never the same after that. The end came on the Levitate album, and Julia Nagel and Mark were an item. And one day Julia came in to the studio where Steve and I were, and the guitarist, whoever that was that week, and said, right, Mark says, drop everything. We're all doing my songs now. We're only doing my songs now. We've been waiting for 3 days, for Mark to turn up. And this is, he sends Julia to tell us that. So that's when I actually walked out.
Did he ever give you any explanation as to why he brought in, it was your predecessor on drums, wasn't it?
Yes, he was, Carl. It started off, I said to Carl, right, listen, I don't mind you having a timbale and a couple of octapads, and a cymbal. I don't want 2 drum kits, and that's how it was.
So he literally invited your predecessor back into the band while you were on holiday, and you had to figure out how it was going to work afterwards.
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's character building, he said. He eventually ended up with a proper drum kit, which really annoyed me. I'm going on the record saying I don't like playing with two drummers. And also, not only that, we're having to pack away Carl Burns' drum kit as well as my own under the tour bus after the gig before we went on a 20-hour drive across America, which I wasn't too happy about. But I had a laugh with Carl. Nobody knows where he is, of course, now. People are trying to find him. Last spotted in out in the hills there near Rottenstall.
Oh, he's vanished.
Yeah, God knows where he is.
Did you and Mark ever actually come to blows?
Yes, twice. The first time, my mother passed away in about 1991, and I was on tour in Europe with the Fall. I was very upset, and he came over to my drum kit at the sound check and pushed the cymbals in on me as I was sat there playing. I said, "Get over it, everybody dies." And I just saw red and got up, started hitting him. And Steve Hanley had to pull me off. Could have cut me or blinded me or anything, with these cymbals. That's the way Mark was. But I did get off.
He sounds like an absolute dick.
Yeah, but he was funny, though. He was funny. He could cut the atmosphere with a knife. When he walked in a room, whether it be a dressing room, somebody's hotel room, he'd be secretly recording us, the band, talking about him on his little Sony Walkman, which used to hide behind the settee in the hotel, and then leave. And naturally, we'd be all talking about him, slagging him off.
So what was the second time you and Mark E. Smith came to blows?
I was chatting up a cloakroom girl in Frankfurt, I think it was, and Mark either fancied the girl himself, and I was, making good progress with this girl, and he threw a bottle at me, a vice beer or something, heavy brown glass, and it hit my body or whatever. And again, he had to be taught, you can't do that to me.
So you had a scrap?
Well, not so much a scrap, it's all one way.
You just belted him?
Yeah, but I knew how to manage him, really, because I liked him, and I knew what would make him sick. I never really, apart from those two times that I had to do something, we got on fine.
It sounds like he had a screw loose.
Well, that's what made him good, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Kind of mad genius kind of thing.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. There's not enough of that now. I mean, Liam Gallagher's still got a bit of that spirit in him, which is good to see. Give me Liam any day, over his brother. When I was in Los Angeles at the Hyatt on Sunset, and Tony McCarroll had just been booted out, and they were drummerless. And I was with my crew, the Fall, that is, in the lift going down to the bar. And he said, "How do you fancy joining the band, Si?" Noel said. And it wasn't an ideal time to ask me, midway through our tour in Los Angeles. I couldn't say, "Yeah, all right." See you, lads. Although I did that with the Weeds.
So you were invited before Alan White to be the drummer in Oasis.
Yeah, I don't know how serious he was, but I could do those beats, any day of the week.
Obviously, you guys were a Manchester band during the rise of Manchester and Britpop, two massive movements in the 90s, completely centered around Manchester. Oasis are quite a big focus of my channel. Are there any other times when your paths crossed?
At the time I met Noel, other than the time when he asked me to join Oasis, I said, "Oh, have you got any gigs for me?" He was doing one song with Ian Brown on stage at the Manchester Apollo, and he just went, "No," and walked off. And I thought, it's a bit rude, And Karma, it's called, but somebody threw a pint pot full one all over him when he was performing the song with Ian, all over his tweed jacket and all over his amplifier and all. And I thought, there you go, that's karma for you.
So you're definitely Team Liam then?
Yes, I am, no doubt about it.
So what's your favourite song you ever recorded with The Fall?
It would have to be Mr. Pharmacist, because that's the one that I hear again and again. Also, very proud of Golden Gaze by Ian Brown. That's another one which I played on at the recording of the Golden Greats album. Probably those two.
So on that album, that's the song where you have a co-writing credit, but there's like 4 drummers listed on that album. Did you just play on the song you helped write, or did you play on any other tunes on that as well?
Yes, I played on Love Like a Fountain.
That's a great tune.
Yes. I'm playing the hi-hats on Dolphins with Monkeys. We did
Cool.
Dolphins with Monkeys and Love Like a Fountain on top of the Pops, of course, which was another tick off my wish list.
So, Si, if people want to find out more about your really interesting life, they can find your book. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, it's called You Can Drum, But You Can't Hide. It starts basically from when I was at school in my first band with Ian and John, right up to the time that I played at Wembley Stadium with the GOD, the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll. It's all in there. And it's £10. You can get it from Root Online or Amazon or Waterstones, anywhere.
Brilliant. And people can also find you on your podcast as well.
Yes, I've got a podcast. It's called Funky Size A to Z of Manchester.
And there's also rumour of a secret supergroup. What can you tell us about that?
I've got my own supergroup that we started earlier this year and recorded an album in 2 days, live, no preparation. And it's coming out in the spring on vinyl. If you look at my Twitter account on my bio, there's a clue to what the band's called there. It is fall related, I'll give you that much. But that's all.
Well, speaking of Twitter, finally, where can people find you on the socials?
Well, Instagram at FunkySize63. I'm on Facebook, and Twitter is Si Wolstencroft1.
Si, thank you so much for coming on the channel. It's been brilliant to talk to you.
It's lovely to meet you, James. Bye for now.